I was supposed to be winding down after a long seminar when an unexpected opportunity presented itself. My seminar had ended a day earlier than planned. Though I couldn't change my ticket, I already had a return scheduled for Wednesday evening. Still, the thought of seeing Amanda sooner ignited a spark of mischief in me. I decided that instead of waiting passively, I'd try to surprise her. After some frantic online searches, I found a flight departing from an airport about 250 kilometers to the south, a journey that used to take a solid 2 hours by car, and booked it on impulse. The flight, a last-minute gamble, set me on a path I hadn't quite anticipated. I hurried to a nearby rental agency and secured a car, adrenaline mingling with excitement as I pictured Amanda's face when I'd show up unannounced. By the time I reached home, around 2 a.m., the darkness of the early morning was oddly fitting for a secret return. But as I approached the house, an unsettling sight greeted me. The porch light was off, the windows dark, and Amanda's car, which I expected to be parked in the driveway, was nowhere to be seen. My heart skipped a beat. I slowed down and parked, my mind racing with questions. Was she really asleep, or was something amiss? I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, the silence on the other end stretching a little too long before she answered in a drowsy tone. "I'm sleeping at home," she mumbled, a statement that should have comforted me if it were true. But it didn't. The calm in her voice was oddly mismatched with the obvious evidence in front of me. Standing there in the quiet, cold night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into a mystery I wasn't prepared to solve. My mind buzzed with possibilities. Had she left for an unexpected errand, or was there something else behind this quiet deception? In that moment, every instinct told me that nothing was quite as it seemed, and that my surprise might unravel secrets I hadn't even suspected existed. The morning light crept in slowly, and I found myself crouched in the narrow confines of the closet by the entrance, a hiding spot I'd never imagined I'd need. I was still reeling from the shock of arriving home to an empty house, and now I was witnessing a scene that confirmed every dark suspicion. The door creaked open, and there she was, Amanda, entering with a man I immediately recognized as Tom, her boss. They moved together with a familiarity that struck me like a blow. Tom's smile was mischievous as he tossed a casual remark, "One more night together would be great," as if that were the simplest of plans. Amanda's laugh, soft and flirtatious, replied, "Oh, honey, my husband wouldn't even notice." Every word was a dagger, twisting deeper into the quiet of that already fractured morning. They fell into an easy conversation, their voices low and intimate. Amanda mentioned details I hadn't expected. Tom casually noted that his wife, living in Los Angeles, was planning to move in about 8 months. The shift in conversation wasn't just about logistics. It was a declaration. This wasn't a fleeting moment of indiscretion or a one-off mistake. I realized with a cold clarity that this betrayal was an ongoing affair, a carefully maintained secret that was now unraveling before my eyes. Every piece of their conversation, the way Amanda's hand lingered on Tom's arm, the glint of excitement in Tom's eyes, the careless confidence in their tone, was a confirmation of a reality I was desperate to deny. In that cramped closet, I could feel my heart pounding like a drum, each beat echoing with the realization that my life was built on a lie. I pressed my ear to the cool wood of the closet door, trying to make sense of it all. The man I had trusted, the partner I believed in, was entangled in something I never saw coming. The conversation shifted, and for a moment, I could almost hear the subtle traces of planning, decisions made without my knowledge, future moves that would further distance us from the life I thought I knew. The mention of a move from Los Angeles wasn't just idle chatter. It was a marker of the shifting sands in our shared history, a timeline I had never been a part of. I stayed there, silent and numb, grappling with the betrayal that now seemed both immediate and deeply rooted. The weight of the secret affair settled around me like a shroud, and I realized that nothing about our life together had been genuine. The shock mingled with a rising determination. Somewhere in the back of my mind, amidst the pain and anger, a seed of resolve took root. I would need to confront this reality, no matter how devastating it might be. And as I listened to them talk, planning their future as if nothing had changed. I knew that my life was about to take a turn I could never have foreseen. After that morning's discovery, I felt a cold fury rising within me, a desire for retribution that refused to be quelled by shock alone. I began piecing together every scrap of information I could, connecting dots with a precision that surprised even me. Through various acquaintances, I learned that Tom's full name was Thomas Franklin, a detail that gave the betrayal a sharper edge. More importantly, I discovered that his wife, Sarah, resided in California, a detail I saw as an opportunity to strike at the heart of his carefully constructed double life. I decided to take the first step by reaching out to Sarah. Posing as a colleague from work, I made a phone call that was both casual and calculated. I told her that the company was throwing a surprise party for Tom, a celebration of sorts, and that they had arranged for a luxurious getaway for him, which included a paid flight and accommodation at a high-end hotel. The excitement in her voice, even through the phone line, was unmistakable. Little did she know that the party was not a celebration of their union, but a meticulously orchestrated trap designed to expose every hidden flaw in their lives. Emboldened by this initial move, I ramped up the plan. I reached out to Amanda's entire network, her family, friends, colleagues, anyone who had ever been a part of the life we had shared. Under the guise of celebrating her supposed promotion, I invited them all to what I painted as an impromptu gathering of success and advancement. The invitations went out with an air of celebration, but each invite carried an undercurrent of irony that only I fully understood. To make the event as unforgettable as I envisioned, I spared no expense. I ordered top-notch catering that promised a feast for the senses, selected an array of drinks that would keep spirits high, and even hired a professional photographer to capture every moment of what I termed the special moment. Every detail was designed to highlight the duplicity of those who had wronged me, a public display of hypocrisy and deceit that I believed was long overdue. As the day of the party drew closer, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. Every phone call, every confirmation email, and every piece of logistics fell into place with a cold, precise inevitability. I wasn't just planning a party. I was setting the stage for a reckoning. It was a moment that would force the betrayal into the harsh light of day, a moment when every lie, every secret meeting, and every whispered promise would be laid bare before those who had once celebrated with us. I couldn't shake the image of Amanda's face that night, the face of a woman I thought I knew, now entangled in a web of deceit. The party was going to be more than just a gathering. It was going to be my statement, my stand against the treachery that had upended my life. In every detail of that day's planning, I was exacting a measure of justice that had been denied to me for far too long. I had spent the entire afternoon meticulously preparing for this night, the night that would finally expose all the deceit that had poisoned my life. As dusk fell, I retreated to the terrace, a quiet observer in the shadows, waiting for the moment when my carefully orchestrated plan would culminate in an unforgettable reveal. The house was bathed in a deceptive calm as I peered out from behind a row of potted plants. I watched with a conflicted mix of anticipation and dread as Amanda arrived, her laughter echoing softly in the cool evening air. She was accompanied by Tom, whose easy smile and confident gait betrayed nothing of the storm that was about to descend. I could see them step through the front door, their joyous banter hinting at intimacy, oblivious to the trap that awaited them. With practiced precision, I made my way to the hidden control panel I had set up earlier in the house. I pressed the switch that plunged the terrace into darkness. The abrupt absence of light was more than a mere signal. It was the cue for the next act of my plan. I retreated into the background, my pulse quickening as I listened for any sign of their movements. Moments later, I could see a sliver of movement through a large window. Amanda had paused, laughing as Tom joked, and then, in a moment that seemed both surreal and deliberate, Tom began to unbutton his shirt. In a fluid, almost cinematic gesture, Amanda followed suit, her dress falling away as if shedding a layer of pretense, and the two of them began to kiss passionately. Their embrace was full of an intimacy that I had once believed to be genuine, but which now reeked of betrayal. It was a moment of raw, exposed passion that I had anticipated with a mixture of revulsion and grim satisfaction. In that precise moment of vulnerability, I knew it was time to bring the full weight of the truth crashing down upon them. I reached out and flipped the switch to turn the lights on, flooding the terrace with brilliant, unforgiving brightness. The sudden illumination revealed a scene I had meticulously orchestrated, a crowd of approximately 30 people, far more than I had ever dared to hope for. Standing in the center of the crowd were familiar faces. Amanda's mother, whose stern gaze had always carried a quiet authority. Her sister, eyes wide with shock and disbelief, and a host of friends and colleagues, each of them equally stunned by the spectacle before them. But nothing could have prepared Amanda or Tom for the final twist. Among the gathered crowd, in a position that demanded attention, stood Tom's wife, Sarah. Her eyes blazed with indignation as she took in the sight of her husband entangled in this brazen display with another woman. In an act that was as swift as it was decisive, Sarah leaped forward. With a determined swing of her arm, she raised her handbag and brought it down onto Tom's head. The force of the blow was enough to send him reeling, and within moments he collapsed onto the floor with a thud that resonated with the collective gasp of the onlookers. For a brief, suspended moment, time seemed to stand still. The terrace, filled with the shock and horror of the gathered witnesses, became a stage for the unveiling of every lie that had been spun over the past months. In the midst of the chaos, Amanda's mother stepped forward, her voice cold and cutting as she addressed her daughter. "You're a disgrace to the family," she spat out, her words slicing through the tension like a knife. The venom in her tone left no room for misinterpretation, a public rebuke that struck at the heart of everything Amanda had once been expected to represent. But the humiliation didn't end there. With a sneer that was almost as cruel as her words, Amanda's mother added, "Maybe it's time you find a new line of work. Why not consider the adult industry?" The remark, delivered in a tone that blended scorn and a twisted sense of practicality, sent ripples of shock through the assembled crowd. It was a final, devastating blow, a public shaming that dismantled any remaining illusions of propriety or dignity. I stood there, half hidden among the guests, watching as the confrontation unfolded in front of me. The scene was chaotic, a collision of raw emotion, unmasked deceit, and long-buried resentments that now surged to the surface with explosive force. Amanda's face, once filled with the ease of familiarity, had contorted into a mask of mortification and disbelief. Tom, struggling to regain his composure on the floor, seemed utterly defeated by the betrayal of his own double life. And Sarah, still seething with anger, glared at him with an intensity that promised retribution beyond tonight's reckoning. In that charged moment, every carefully laid piece of my plan coalesced into a vivid tableau of broken trust and public humiliation. The gathered crowd, once mere pawns in this intricate game of revenge, now bore witness to the collapse of a carefully constructed facade. The bright lights of the terrace shone down on us all, stripping away the layers of pretense and revealing the raw, unfiltered truth in its harshest form. I felt a strange amalgamation of emotions, satisfaction intermingled with sorrow, justice shadowed by the cost of our shattered illusions. This was no longer just a personal vendetta. It had become a dramatic reordering of lives, a public spectacle that would leave an indelible mark on everyone present. As the murmurs and gasps of the crowd swirled around me, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The betrayals, the lies, and the reckless pursuit of forbidden desires had all come crashing down under the unyielding glare of the spotlight, leaving behind only the cold, unvarnished reality that could no longer be denied. The chaos of that unforgettable evening slowly seeped into a heavy, surreal silence as the guests began to disperse and the reality of the night's events fully set in. In the midst of the confusion, I could hardly believe the sight before me. Tom, still reeling from his earlier collapse on the terrace, made a desperate bid for freedom. His attempts to slip away were immediately thwarted. His wife, Sarah, along with her brother who had arrived in a flurry moments earlier, intercepted him with determined force. They blocked his path, their expressions etched with a blend of fury and resolve. It was clear that escape was not an option for him tonight. Inside the house, Amanda sought refuge from the unfolding debacle in the one place she thought might offer her some semblance of privacy, the bathroom. I could hear her muffled cries and the sound of hurried footsteps as she tried to disappear behind the locked door, a silent plea for protection against the avalanche of humiliation that had just overtaken her life. Her distress was palpable, each sound a stark reminder of the irreversible damage done to the life she once knew. Meanwhile, I found myself retreating to a quiet corner of the now eerily quiet living room. Amid the fragments of shattered dreams and broken trust, I sat down at a table laden with food, a spread of spicy, tangy wings that somehow managed to evoke a twisted sense of normalcy. With a deliberate calmness, I poured myself a glass of expensive 18-year-old whiskey. The amber liquid shimmered under the newly restored lights, a stark contrast to the bitter taste of betrayal that had characterized the evening. As I took a slow, measured sip, I allowed myself a brief moment of indulgence, a small comfort in the eye of the storm that had swept through our lives. It wasn't long before Sarah, still fuming from the spectacle that had unfolded, commandeered the center of attention once more. In a tone that brooked no argument, she announced her intentions to file for divorce. "I'm done," she declared with unyielding conviction, her voice resonating with finality as she outlined her plans to hire the best lawyers in New York. The announcement rippled through the crowd like a shockwave, each listener absorbing the gravity of the moment in their own way. Sarah's decision was not just a personal one. It was a statement, a declaration that no amount of deceit or heartbreak could keep her tethered to a life defined by betrayal. The reaction from Amanda's family was instantaneous and visceral. Shock and disbelief contorted their faces, a cacophony of murmurs and stunned silence that underscored the magnitude of what had just transpired. Amid the collective outrage and sorrow, Amanda's mother emerged as a figure of harsh, unyielding judgment. With a voice that trembled between indignation and a cold sense of inevitability, she pronounced, "She's been punished enough." Her words, delivered with the weight of years of expectations and family honor, reverberated in the charged atmosphere, leaving little room for any argument or plea for redemption. It was as if her declaration sealed Amanda's fate. A final verdict passed in the court of public opinion, leaving no possibility for a soft landing. In that lingering aftermath, as I nursed my whiskey and reflected on the events with a grim mixture of satisfaction and sorrow, the night seemed to stretch on interminably. Each person in that room was now irrevocably altered by what had transpired, a mosaic of shattered relationships, unfulfilled promises, and lives turned upside down. I couldn't help but feel that, in some twisted way, justice had been served. The carefully orchestrated moment of reckoning had revealed not just the lies and betrayals, but also the raw, unvarnished truth about the people involved. For me, the journey to this point had been a long and agonizing one, culminating in a bittersweet vindication as I watched the dominoes fall into place. While Amanda's anguished cries from the bathroom and the stunned silence of the onlookers painted a grim picture of irreversible loss, my quiet act of savoring wings and sipping whiskey provided a stark counterpoint, a personal catharsis amidst the ruins of a life built on deceit. It was in that delicate balance between retribution and regret that I found a perverse sort of solace, even as I braced myself for the uncertain future that awaited us all after that fateful night. After the last of the guests had shuffled out into the cool night air, an eerie silence fell over the house, a silence that was as much a part of the aftermath as the shattered remnants of our former lives. I remained seated in the living room, the earlier chaos now reduced to a haunting stillness, punctuated only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the soft creaks of the settling house. I was alone with my thoughts, the bitter taste of retribution still fresh on my tongue, when I heard soft, tentative footsteps approaching from the hallway. Amanda emerged from the shadows, her eyes red and puffy from endless tears, her usual poise replaced by a palpable fragility. The weight of the evening seemed to have collapsed upon her, leaving her exposed and desperate. For a moment, she hesitated, as if uncertain whether the person before her was still the husband she once knew, or if he had become irrevocably hardened by the truth. The silence stretched between us as she mustered the courage to speak. Jake," she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and panic. I know I made a mistake." Her words came in halting bursts, each one laden with the regret of choices that had led us here. "You worked so hard, and I felt so alone. You were never really there, were you? Always buried in your work, always chasing something that wasn't us. And Tom, he was the one who paid attention to me, who made me feel seen." Her confession was raw and unfiltered, her tears streaming down her face as if washing away the remnants of her old self. I couldn't help but let out a short, bitter laugh, a sound that was both incredulous and pitiless. "Is that what you think?" I replied, my voice low and measured. "That because I worked too hard, you could just seek comfort somewhere else? That it's somehow my fault that you found solace in another man?" I shook my head, trying to suppress the storm of emotions that churned within me. The irony was as thick as the tension in the room. Here she was trying to justify her betrayal by pointing the finger at me, as if my absence was an invitation for her to stray. I leaned back, the muscles in my face tightening as I let the laughter die away into a cold, dismissive tone. It's typical behavior of cheaters to blame the other party. You want to paint a picture where I'm the absentee partner, but the truth is, you made your own choices. You decided to turn to Tom when you felt a moment of weakness. And now, after everything's come to light, you expect me to understand? To excuse your actions with a sob story about loneliness. Her eyes widened in a mixture of shock and sorrow, and for a moment, I saw in them the ghost of the woman I once loved. The woman who might have been saved from this downfall, if only she'd sought help or spoken up before the lies had piled too high. But that version of Amanda was long gone, replaced by someone who had allowed herself to be seduced by fleeting attention and empty promises. "But it didn't mean anything, Jake," she pleaded, her voice breaking as she took a hesitant step toward me. "It was just a mistake that didn't define me, that didn't mean I loved you any less." I studied her for a long moment, the silence stretching out as if to underscore the finality of our conversation. The remnants of our shared past, once a sanctuary of love and trust, now lay scattered at our feet like broken glass. Each shard caught a bit of the light, reflecting memories of happier times. But they were sharp reminders of how irreparably things had changed. "Amanda," I said slowly, the weight of each syllable sinking into the charged air between us, "I've made up my mind. It's not just about the mistake, it's about the choices you made after it. When you chose Tom, you weren't just seeking an escape from loneliness. You were choosing to betray the very foundation of our life together. And no amount of tears or apologies can rebuild that." She reached out, her hand trembling as it hovered between us, a silent plea for forgiveness that I knew could never be granted. "Please try to understand," she whispered, desperation edging her words. "I was lost, and I didn't know how to come back. I thought if I could just feel something real, even if it was just for a moment, it would bring me back to us." But her voice faltered, and she seemed to shrink into herself, the raw pain of her own realization cutting deeper than any insult I could deliver. I shook my head slowly, a bitter smile curving on my lips as I regarded her with a mixture of pity and finality. "Understand this," I said firmly, my voice rising above the soft echoes of the night. "You've not only betrayed me, you've betrayed everything we built together. And blaming me for working hard, no matter how many hours I put in, only shows that you're not willing to take responsibility for your own choices." The room, filled with the ghosts of our happier times, now seemed to close in around us as I spoke, each word a step toward the irreversible conclusion. The air between us grew thick with a sense of irrevocable finality. Amanda's eyes welled up once more, and she took a step back, her voice barely audible as she tried once again to defend her actions. "It didn't mean anything, really. I was just lost. But I had already spoken my truth. and it reverberated in the silence that followed, a silence that said everything that needed to be said without another word. As I looked at her, the woman who once had been my confidant and partner, I realized that the path back to what we once had was now forever closed. The choices we had made, the betrayal, the lies, the pursuit of fleeting attention, had driven us to this final, inescapable moment. And with a final, lingering look that held both sorrow and resolve, I knew that nothing could ever undo the damage done. The trust, once shattered, lay in pieces too sharp to mend, and in that heartbreaking truth, I made peace with the end of us. The morning after everything had come crashing down, I woke to a sense of quiet finality. The events of the previous night still echoed in my mind, but now I was determined to close that chapter for good. I went to my lawyer's office without hesitation. With a reputation for being as uncompromising as he was brilliant, my lawyer wasted no time filing for divorce. In the settlement negotiations that followed, Amanda received only minimal financial support, a decision that, while harsh, felt like the natural consequence of her choices. It was a cold end to what had once been a life we both had invested in. Once the legalities were wrapped up, I turned my attention to my physical surroundings. The house, which had witnessed so many memories, both good and painful, had become a symbol of our fractured past. I made the decision to sell it quickly. The sale was swift, almost as if the universe was eager to rid me of any reminders of betrayal. With the proceeds in hand and a heart set on a new beginning, I packed up my few remaining belongings and left town without looking back. Miami was my destination, a city renowned for its vibrant energy and endless possibility. The warm, salt-tinged breeze was a welcome contrast to the cold winds of my old life. I found myself drawn to the ocean, a symbol of vast, uncharted territory and a promise of renewal. It wasn't long before I set my sights on a luxurious penthouse overlooking the endless blue horizon. The building itself was a modern marvel, a testament to reinvention and the thrill of starting over. Every morning, I'd wake to breathtaking views of the ocean, a constant reminder that life was still full of beauty, even after heartbreak. Meanwhile, as I began rebuilding, I kept a wary eye on the fallout of the night's revelations. Tom's double life, once so carefully hidden, was now exposed to the harsh light of reality. The repercussions came swiftly. He lost his job, a casualty of his unprofessional behavior, and as if in poetic justice, his wife's wrath sealed his fate further. Sarah, ever the fierce force of nature, managed to secure a divorce settlement that netted her over $5 million. Her triumph was a stark contrast to Tom's downfall, and it served as a potent reminder that betrayal and misfortune do not discriminate. They simply reshape lives. One humid afternoon, not long after I had settled into my new Miami penthouse, there was an unexpected knock at my door. I opened it to find Amanda standing there, her face a mixture of regret, longing, and desperation. Her eyes, which once shone with unspoken promises of forgiveness, were now damp with tears. She took a tentative step forward and, in a voice barely above a whisper, she pleaded for another chance. Her words tumbled out in a rush, a desperate request to try and mend what had been broken, to recapture even a fragment of the life we once had. For a brief moment, I looked at her, taking in the familiar features that had once been so precious. But as I listened, the weight of all that had transpired pressed down on me. I remembered every instance of deceit, every moment of betrayal that had led to this irreversible decision. I recalled the orchestrated humiliation on that terrace, the cruel words, and the irrevocable loss of trust. My heart, though it had once ached for her, was now armored with the resolve that no amount of sorrow or apology could undo the damage. I stepped aside and, with a steady calmness that belied the tumultuous emotions within, I closed the door behind her. In that action lay my final act of closure, a definitive end to a chapter that had caused far too much pain. As the door clicked shut, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The echoes of the past, with all its betrayal and heartache, were finally behind me. Now, in the quiet solitude of my penthouse, I sat by the expansive windows, watching the sunset over the ocean. The vibrant hues of red and gold spread across the sky, mirroring the fiery determination that now burned within me. I poured myself a glass of that expensive 18-year-old whiskey, a fitting reward for the hard-fought freedom I had secured. Every sip was a reminder that I had the power to shape my own destiny, one that was no longer shackled by the mistakes of the past. In this new life, I embraced the opportunities that awaited. Miami offered endless possibilities, a vibrant city where every day promised a new beginning, a fresh canvas on which to paint my future. The wounds of betrayal were still there, etched into my memory, but they no longer defined me. I was determined to move forward, to rebuild my life on my own terms. With the sound of gentle waves and the soft hum of the city in the background, I felt a profound sense of peace and resolve. That day, as I sat alone, I understood that sometimes the end of one story is merely the prelude to a new, unexpected chapter. One where I was free to live unapologetically, to reinvent myself, and to finally find solace in the promise of a new dawn.